The combine seems like where it all starts. No, that's just what it looks like. It actually starts, it meaning player procurement starts in free agency. We'll tell you what the Jaguars need to do at the very beginning here on Locked On Jaguars.
You are Locked On Jaguars, your daily Jacksonville Jaguars podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Ain't no doubt about it, man. It's your team every day here on Locked On Jaguars. We thank you for making us your first listen. A reminder that wherever you get your podcast, whether you listen or watch, make sure you tap into that location each and every day so you do not miss an episode. We like to give a special shout out to our everydayers for joining us, and you can be one. All you got to do, man, is tap in each and every day so you don't miss an episode. You can come in every day. All right, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Make sure you guys tap into FanDuel, man, and have some fun while you're sitting here talking about the NFL. The NBA is going on, so make sure you get on over there. All right, here's what we're going to talk about today. What intangibly rich means. I can give you the book definition, and then from a football perspective, I can tell you what I think GM James Gladstone is trying to convey when he says that. In the middle, what do they do in round one? I'm getting a lot of questions. I did a little bit of a Jaguars mailbag, and I have a lot of interesting things to say about that. I'll go through some of those questions. I may not mention your name. Don't worry about it. Don't take it personal. Don't get mad. All right, but we're going to start at the very top, where the Jaguars should begin. Hopefully they have begun with an intense player evaluation of their roster. They do still have some people in the building, the scouts, the pro scouts, as well as EVP Tony Baselli, who, while he was in a radio capacity, was still very much involved with knowing and understanding everything that goes on or went on in that building for the last couple of years. So, I was wrong a little bit when I said it's a totally fresh start with nobody that's tied to anything from the past. When coaches take over teams, when they have guys that's under contract, they firmly believe that those are their players. Now, Urban Meyer was one of the people that said that from the very beginning, and I know y'all don't think that Urban has any value, but in this case, he does, because that's an absolute truth that those are your players, the ones that are under contract. Then you have to think about the guys that are in-house, not really in-house, but not yet free to go sign with other people. They have to evaluate the roster, okay? That's the first thing that they have to do. I'm going to give you my guesstimation as to what the ultimate goal is. Because when you think about the Rams, the Super Bowl Rams, they built with the draft. A lot of people believe that because they went out and traded for Jalen Ramsey and Von Miller, they signed Von Miller, and then they made a trade for Matthew Stafford, that meant that they didn't really build through the draft. The day that they won the Super Bowl, 25 of their players were drafted, right? So that leaves half the roster that wasn't. But that's because they got so close. Remember, that wasn't the first Super Bowl they went to. They went to the Super Bowl before that and only scored 3 points. That is what made them believe, okay, we're close, but we need to push ourselves over the edge. And if the opportunity presents itself, that's what we're going to do. And that's what they did. Not soon after that, they, tried to run it back a little bit, but when it didn't work, they started to retool, and they said, okay, let's rebuild it through the draft again. And now they're right back into the playoffs. They could have been in the NFC Championship game if it weren't for a bad throw here or there or bad weather. So now they're right back. And this is why James Gladstone really, really believes in building through the draft, because he's actually watched them do it twice. He's watched them do it twice. So I'm going to say something here in the first segment that is actually going against, because these guys talk about where they came from, but they also talk about owning this and making this their own thing, right? They've shown you that they've come from places that can win in multiple ways, in different ways. So they've come together here to put their spin on everything. The starting center right now for Los Angeles is a guy named Bo Limmer, who was a 6th or 7th round pick, one or the other. I think he was either 6th or 7th round pick, but he comes from Wisconsin, so everybody knows if you get an interior offensive lineman from Wisconsin, he's probably going to develop and turn into something, right? That would lead you to think that maybe they would try to duplicate that. I think they still will draft an interior offensive line or a center late. I think they're going to sign Drew Dahlman and or at least go after him. I have no information that indicates that they have any interest in him. He's the top center on the market. He is a stellar zone blocking scheme run blocker. Devastating. Okay. Not necessarily the biggest guy in the world at 6'3", 300, but he gets it done. That's Jason Kelsey type size. So that's fine, right? I really do think that that's where they should start. That's I mean, it gives you the base. They've talked about in improving the interior of the offensive line so that the quarterback, I forgot the exact term that was used, but I think they get a chance to do that right away. And then later on in the draft, if you're going to hit on somebody again in the 6th or 7th round and you can put them in development, well, there will be your future guy. Dahlman's 26 now, maybe 27 by the time the year ends. Now you can get a dude behind him for 3 or 4 years just in case he gets hurt, or just in case something happens 3 years down the road, you have a guy in-house who's ready to go who can play center. I know all the Grays Abel fans are sitting there saying, no, don't do it. Look, Grays Abel can play guard too. We'll get to that in just a second. I do believe that's a really good start for the Jaguars, and it'll probably give them the best center they've had since Brad Meester. So I would be willing to do that and go sort of all in on that position and all in on that player. That's just the start. That's just the start. I believe they also can double back on the interior, the offensive line with Will Fries. I think that's his name, or Will Freeze. I keep getting that mixed up. But that's another thing that I think that they might do. They could also go and get veterans like Joe Noteboom, who played a backup role in Los Angeles, who they're very familiar with. Jonah Jackson has gotten permission to seek a trade. He only played 1 year in Los Angeles because he got banged up, but he was a starter prior to that. He was a starter with the Detroit Lions and actually went to a Pro Bowl or something like that. So he was a very good player for them, and he doesn't have a lot of tread depending on what his history is injury-wise. But I think you attack the offensive line by getting a center and then getting guys also that raise the floor, like some of these backup players that they had that you don't know about. No, they can go out and get veterans that don't cost a whole bunch of money that they can say, hey, man, I need you to come in and compete and try to push the guys in front of you. So that's the first thing I would do. So when you get to what do they do in round one, there's other things that they would do. I would also, I hope this answers some of the questions, because what I'm going to do, instead of reading the questions for the most part, I'm going to try to answer them in my comments. The other thing that I would address, I would make sure that I address in free agency, is I would get a veteran safety. I think this is a good safety market. I know they signed Darnell Savage last year. I still would go get another safety. I think they need a dynamic player, and there are a bunch of guys out there, whether it be Devon Holland, Trayvon Merrick. They're expensive. Some of them are expensive, but they are experienced players. Guys that can play. Justin Reed is someone else that I would be very happy if they went out and got. I even say, hey, my man Tufanga, who started out like gangbusters, who runs around in the middle of the defense in San Francisco, he got banged up last year. I wouldn't mind if they double dipped in this area if it's not too expensive. I like Cam Bynum. I think Cam Bynum is a real good fit for Minnesota. I don't necessarily know if he'd be a fit here. There's also talk that they are interested. I got a late night message from a man, Peter Bukowski of Locked On Packers, that he has heard from credible sources that the Jaguars are also interested in Jair Alexander. So if they get that veteran corner, that takes one of those things off the table that they need. And he'd be a good, solid. Him and Stokes, the other kid in Green Bay. Get them both if you have to. I don't care. But at least if they come away with one of them, that'll be an experienced player that understands the workflow of defense coordinator Anthony Campanile, as well as the new defensive backs coach. So that's where I'll start. I say safety. Well, I say center, safety, veteran corner via trade or in free agency. That's where I'd start. Now, segment 2, we get to what do they do in round 1. I didn't say no. I think I said number 5 overall earlier, but I'll just say round 1. We'll get to that and more here in just a second on Locked On Jaguars. All right, today's show is sponsored and brought to you by FanDuel. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on that, to get in on it than at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. When FanDuel kicks off, man, you can place live bets throughout the game. So even if you miss the opening tip-off or you want to be on a fourth quarter comeback and watch that, you can stay in on the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets with the same game parlay. I love using FanDuel's live betting feature because it allows you to make some adjustments a little bit to what you think is going to happen, and it keeps the game excited. Even if your team is trying to rally or you just need somebody to hit a clutch three, it never feels like you're missing your chance. Plus, the app is easy to use, and when you win, you get paid. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Kicking along here on Locked On NFL, where it is your team every day. We thank you for making us your first listen. This is Locked On NFL, but this is actually Locked On Jaguars. When you do two shows, man, sometimes you forget exactly where you are. I'm going to get these off real quick, and I don't have to read nothing else, so I can just go ahead and spit this knowledge out to you. We've addressed in the first segment that it would be a combination of Drew Dahlman at center, and there isn't another center I would sign. It's him, or you're going to draft one, okay, and go into the season with who you got. But it's him. That would be my first goal. My second goal would be to find the safety that is the best fit, not only schematically, but financially and intangibly. We'll get to that in a little bit. And then one of those corners from Green Bay, whether it be a trade for Jair Alexander, that would actually be my choice, and hope that, the strength and conditioning program here and the doctors here can get him right so he's not consistently banged up like he has been the last couple of years. Or go after Stokes, young kid that came out of Georgia. He knows Tyson Campbell very well. They came out at the same time. So that's where I would go early on in free agency. Of course, if something else presents itself, you always do it. There's a possibility I'd also go and try to tap into that veteran edge rusher market, even though this edge rush class is really, really deep in the draft. You need 4 guys, right? You could, maybe the staff looks at Yasir Abdullah as a dude that they can use in one of those spots. Mason Cole was drafted last year. Maybe he's someone, but I wouldn't just sell out with that. I would go in and possibly find out if there is a group of veterans that I think could work out. And I've already gone through that. I told you there's a kid in Dallas that had 5.5 sacks last year. I would probably go after him, especially since the Cowboys are using their money everywhere else. So he's a top 100 free agent. He's not the kind of dude you're going to break the bank for. We talked about that previously. So that's where I might be able to go with that and then take another look at it in the free agency. In the draft. But in round 1, I'm getting a lot of questions. First of all, somebody asked me if I thought Travis Hunter was worthy of the 5th pick. Yes. Somebody else asked me if you think Travis Hunter is going to be gone by number 3, would you trade up for him? No, I would not. If you get Jair Alexander in free agency, would you then want Travis Hunter at 5? No, because I don't want Travis Hunter as a wide receiver. I want Travis Hunter as a corner. But if they decide to get Travis Hunter as a wide receiver, I even though Brian Thomas Jr. is bigger, I do think now you got 2 of the same type guys. And that doesn't mean that can't work, right? But you always hear people talk about their wide receiver room and how they want it to look differently. Well, the way that they said that they're going to run their passing game through Brian Thomas Jr., that doesn't sit well, I think, with then drafting another guy in the top 5. So now that may lead me to the Ted McMillan situation. I understand that one a little bit better because it gives you a little bit of a difference and a variance in your room. A lot of people are comparing Ted McMillan to Mike Evans. Some people call it lazy. I don't necessarily call it lazy. I understand the comparison because the body types, they have had success at being able to get guys like that involved in their offense. So He's a really, really solid route runner. He has a tremendous catch radius. That would intrigue me, although, again, taking a receiver in the top 5 when you already said you're running your passing game through your second-year wide receiver might not be something that overall in a vacuum that they decide that they want to do, even if they need a receiver. But I would not be against that. A lot of talk about Mason Graham. I like Mason Graham. I don't think any less of him because he weighed in at 296 pounds. But I also have to tell you that that difference of 24 pounds that he was listed at, that makes a little bit of a difference with me because I think the Jaguars need to address the interior, but I think they need to do it with a guy who can line up in the 0 or the 1 gap and still get pass rush, i.e. Vita Vea. I don't think you can do that if you're 296 pounds, and it might cause a little bit of redundancy at the Jaguars for having a whole bunch of dudes that basically are 3 technique types. You can get away with that as long as you have one guy who's great. I don't know if Mason is great. Jalen Carter is great, and Jalen Carter plays nose tackle in their base defense, but he's a pass rusher also. So I do believe a lot of this stuff is going to come down to intangibles, and I'm glad we're going to start talking about that. Because they're going to get guys that fit. They're going to get guys that can be themselves, which means they're not going to shy away from dudes that may have a personality. It's not about blending personalities, man. And I think a lot of people think that the Jaguars are going to get this type of guy. Like the only way you can affect culture is getting a whole bunch of dudes that walk, think, and that are group think, group act guys. That's not the way that I see it. I see it as we don't care what your personality is as long as it's not disruptive. And you can be yourself all day long, and as long as everybody has the common goal to come in here and work hard and love football, be smart, and want to be basically nerds at how to diagnose and how to set up football. Because when you look at the staff, I jokingly said last night, it's like Revenge of the Nerds, right? It was really like, and I don't mean nerd in a bad way. I mean nerd and guys that maybe they didn't play it at a high level, but it's a whole bunch of dudes that all they did for their entire careers or since they've probably been teenagers is sit around and figure out how to dial it up on you. It's like a whole bunch of 25 or 30-year-old Steve Spurriers over there. It's like they're ball guys. They're ball coaches, man. They will sit and design stuff up to whoop you all day long. And see, that's something that is going to help this football team. I think players have to actually have that sort of mentality too. So what are they doing in round 1? I don't know. Do they move back? I don't know. Remember, it's about, just like it's players over plays, it's also players over probably positional value. It's players over what we're supposed to do. They're going after the people in these spots, not necessarily all of this other stuff that we're so used to. It's like, well, you can't do this, you can't do that, you can't do this, you can't do that. Within reason, I understand that there's a lot of things that you can't do, but remember, they are going after people, humans, guys that they fall in love with, that they want to bring them into, and here's the word again, the ecosystem of the Jaguars, and grow and build it. And also remember this, keep this in mind. They're not doing this just to field the team for 2025. Understandably, that does play a part, like how we're going to line up next year and what are we going to do. But this is more about, I believe, starting your program off with the right type of people, getting a good start and a good foundation and a good base for the next decade, as opposed to it is just thinking about lining up next year and how they play in 2025. It's not fantasy football. It's more like dynasty. That's what it is. All right, man, we'll discuss that more, and we'll get to the meaning and what I believe what intangibly rich means. James Gladstone's one of his phrases that he uses a lot, and we'll discuss that more here on Locked On Jaguars. James Gladstone, the new GM of the Jaguars, has some things that he likes to say that do a really, really good job of explaining his position. It's really, really simple. There's no magic to the words. I think the magic is in the simplicity and the clarity that he speaks. And that's a good thing, so no word soup, just things that you can understand. Somebody asked me, what does intangibly rich means? So intangibles are, before I give you the definition, intangibles to me represent things that you really can't measure. It's like, how somebody tells you got to be there. Like, I don't know how to describe it, but I'll know it when I see it. To me, those are intangibles, things that people can't measure that make you special and that cause a positive result, right? So I'm going to look here at the definition and listen to this. It says in the Cambridge Dictionary, intangibly means in a way that cannot be described exactly or that does not have a physical form. So with Trent Baalke, everything was physical, right? And we'll work on all the other stuff. And we'll shape and mold it. Remember, I told you the story the other day that he told me somebody was rough around the edges and they come from nothing, but he could figure out how to, you got the talent and they want to be here and all of that crap. But now this is like they have something, a magic that we're looking for, something that we want in our organization or we already have in our organization. Something that if we invite it in our organization, it is just going to absolutely blossom because we have the type of culture and our thermostat is set and the light is open in our greenhouse that allows that thing to blossom. So that thing, the reason why I'm glad that it is considered quote unquote intangible when it's something that you can't describe, even if they could describe it, I wouldn't describe it to anybody because now you're giving away your sauce. So that undescribable thing that they know that they're looking for, but they can't really tell you what it is. You just got to be there and see it. That is what they're looking for. And they want guys that have those intangibles and they have them in a rich way, which means abundant, right? So they want an abundance of guys that have an abundance of the intangible things that they are looking for. And those things will eventually establish the foundation and the culture for this franchise, right? And they won't describe it because they can't really describe it. But since they are like-minded and they are aligned, they know exactly what it is. And this is why it's so important to me that those guys are in alignment. And people are talking about who's going to have the last say and all of that. I hope the last say stuff doesn't take on the same, because with Jaguar fans, I love y'all to death. You know that. But y'all got a real habit of taking one thing and hanging on to that thing, and you want your pound of flesh until that question is answered. The reason why it's something being intangibly rich, because remember, it's immeasurable and you can't really describe it. That'll answer y'all's question right there. So I don't want y'all to sit here and try to get a definitive answer and have a description on everything. Who's calling the plays and who's not, because y'all held on to that for so long. And I'll tell you what, there was a person that was on the staff in Philly told me this with Doug. And I told y'all what Doug did. He called the first 20 plays. They designed the offense all week. And then Doug even told you that when the game gets going, you got to turn it over to somebody else. And he never sees a play that he wouldn't have called from Press Taylor or whoever else. If Doug told you he was the play caller and he was actually calling all the plays, I guarantee you it would have been the same ones that Press called. And no matter how many times I tried to tell y'all that without actually revealing my source or telling y'all that, you just wouldn't listen. Now you put it all together and you realize that it was right. And some of y'all still think that Doug would still be here had he just called plays and not Press Taylor. Are y'all kidding me? No, he wouldn't have, because the plays Press called are the ones that Doug taught him how to call. And they did it together. They worked on the game plan together. And Doug has on a headset. How many times y'all heard me say that? So I hope this doesn't take on a life of its own and start to be, well, who made the last call? I wonder who made that. It does not matter. James Gladstone even said, even if they have a disagreement about a player and they just decide to move on to the players that they absolutely do agree about, even if the player that they had a disagreement about goes on to be successful, it's irrelevant. It does not matter, because it doesn't mean that that player would have been successful here if people in the building didn't all have the same feeling about him. So I don't want y'all to start overblowing that kind of stuff, and holding on to it. Just vibe, man. Just like I said yesterday, just vibe. That's all. All right. So I'm going to go through a couple more of these questions, at least try to a little bit here. With Abdul Carter's foot injury, is there a chance he slips out of the top 4? No chance. Everybody's already said that injury will be healed in 8 weeks. And there's no chance that thing's going to get any better or any worse than that. I hope I answered most of these questions. Someone thinking that there's a lot of overreaction to the inexperience of the staff, it's yet to be seen. I'll remind people though that when Tom Coughlin took over, he had never been a GM. He was the GM and the head coach. He had only been a head coach at Boston College, not in the NFL, and that was a rarity back in those days. They, the owner at the time was a first-time owner. There was a lot of firsts, and those are the glory years of the Jaguars. They got people in the Ring of Honor: Tom Coughlin, Fred Taylor, Tony Baselli, Wayne and Dolores Weaver. They're all in the Ring of Honor. Those are the glory years of the Jacksonville Jaguars. And basically, with the exception of Tom being a head coach, he had never been even a coordinator in the National Football League before. And he was 46 years old, whereas Liam Cohen's 39. So there's a little bit of a difference in that. And the difference is Tom had at least been a head coach at Boston College. But the NFL and college were two totally different worlds back then. So you have to factor that into it. It's not like them taking a head coach from college now, making him a head coach in the NFL. The worlds that they existed in were totally different. And they were more or less, depending on Tom's ability as a head coach in the National Football League, as an assistant coach in the Football League in the NFL, more than they were dependent on him knowing as a head coach what to do, because college and the NFL was so differently. So I would not worry about that either. Keep your eyes on the combine, man. They're going to be looking at players, not necessarily positions. Kind of remember in your mind, too, whoever they go out and get in free agency is meant to help them right now. Whoever they draft is meant to be the best player available that fits the organization. And it could be someone who, while he can help them and provide competition in year one, it may be more about the next 5 years and setting the template for the future, the immediate and the not so immediate future for the Jaguars. The draft is a place where you go. I look at the draft. I look at free agency like run to the store and get something. You need something, you're cooking. Hey man, I need you here. Here's $50. I need you to go get this right now. I look at the draft as, hey, let's go, pack the van, make room. There's no budget. Don't get a buggy. Get one of those flatbed. We're going through this big store, and we're going to walk through here, and we're going to make sure we get everything we want. Now, for this, we're going to get long. These are stuff we're putting in the pantry. And some of that stuff is going to be able to help us right away. All of it's going to have the mantra of coming in and creating competition and go win the day. But at the end of the day, this is not saying that people think that you're going to get projects, or when you say traits, you're talking about, no, you're weighing it all out. Who is the best prospect for our franchise? It's great if they can provide immediate help. But the big thing is, let's just do the best thing for the team, almost like we have us a little bit of a blank canvas. Somebody asked me, should they draft or trade down and take Will Campbell? Depends on what they do in free agency. So if they go out and, and then I don't know what they feel about Walker Little and Anton Harrison. It's not their job to tell us those things. But if they did that and decided that his versatility if Will Campbell's versatility says, hey, look, man, if we have to, we'll play him at left guard, but we know he can play left tackle if Walker gets hurt, or if Walker isn't playing well, or if Anton isn't playing well at right, we can move Walker over to right and bounce him out. If they see his value that way and they think he's going to be a real good football player, I ain't got no problem with them sitting at number 5 taking Will Campbell. Not at all. I don't. Even if they sign Drew Dahlman and Will Fries or Freeze, right? I don't mind, because now you really fix the interior offensive line. And then with the coaching and the change in scheme, you hope that Anton Harrison and Walker Little live up to it. But I would suspect that the Jaguars in this draft, with the number of picks they have, will touch that offensive line even at about 2 times. They're going to touch it about 2 times. Somebody asked me, is there a huge difference between Joshua Farmer and Mason Graham? I couldn't tell you that. But every year I look at the draft, I look at the pre-draft boards, and then I go back. You could go on drafthistory.com, right, and look at each draft and just go through and pick by pick. And you'll notice there will be guys like Puka Nacua who were picked in the 3rd or 4th round. And there'll be guys that are picked late who turned out to be better than people that were picked in front of them. I did a little bit of it yesterday on yesterday's podcast. So I don't know who's going to end up being best. A lot of it has something to do with them, but a lot of it has something to do with where they end up. Now, if you ask me Mason Graham or Walter Nolan, I'll probably tell you I think Walter Nolan's going to be better. I probably will. And that's the difference because they're the same size. And I actually thought I thought they were almost unequal. I thought Walter Nolan was a little bit quick off the ball, but the difference is that Mason Graham was 20 pounds heavier. Well, he's not. They're the same size. So now that's out of the window. The guy I want y'all to watch for is Darius Alexander. I'm going to say it. I'll say it again over and over again. Watch out for Darius Alexander and the other kid up at Oregon, Harmon. I'm telling you, those positions might seem a little bit redundant for Jacksonville. I actually think Darius Alexander can play a little bit more of that 0, that 1. 6'4", 305, can probably easily get up to 315 because of his 6'4" frame and his long arms. So we'll just have to wait and see what they decide. All of it's going to come down, though, to the things that we won't see. And those are those one-on-one meetings. Those are the film study. Those are the conversations that they have with the coaches, the conversations that they have with maybe a member of the janitorial staff at the college, maybe a professor or a guidance counselor. The Jaguars are really putting a premium on the people that they're bringing into the organization and not just the physical traits. You guys hang tough with me, man, and check me out on Locked On NFL twice a day. Tyler Rowland in the morning and me in the barbershop in the afternoon. I'm in the barbershop right now. Make sure you tap in wherever you get your podcast. All right, man, have a good weekend. Enjoy the combine. I'm sure we'll get a whole bunch of stuff from this weekend, and when we come back Monday, we'll be able to hit you with a lot of information. We'll see you next time here on Locked On Jaguars.